For decades, hikers believed the forest held nothing more than wildlife and silence. But the footage you're about to see tells a very different story, because whatever was out there wasn't an animal, and it wasn't human. I'm Trevor, and welcome everyone to Bigfoot Encounters. Maya Collins, a 24-year-old wilderness lifestyle vlogger, was filming the latest episode of her 48 Hours Alone in the Wilderness series in the remote Cascade Range of Washington State when her cameras captured something extraordinary. On September 15, 2019, Maya began her typical upbeat educational content about wilderness survival and nature appreciation. Her footage would later be analyzed frame by researchers worldwide, revealing details that Maya herself wouldn't notice until much later. Maya's initial footage follows the familiar pattern of wilderness vlogging content. She methodically documents her campsite selection process, explaining to her audience the importance of water access, wind protection, and level ground. Her tripod camera captures her setting up shelter while she provides running commentary about wilderness safety. Maya told her camera that the spot was absolutely perfect while arranging her gear. She pointed out that there was fresh water from the creek about 50 yards down, natural windbreak from the massive Douglas firs, and an incredible view. What Maya couldn't have known was that her educational content about water purification, fire building, and shelter construction was being observed. Later analysis of her footage would reveal subtle movements in the background, shadows that didn't match the wind patterns, shapes that appeared and disappeared at the edge of the frame. During her evening routine, Maya set up her tripod camera to capture her dinner preparation and star photography setup. She casually mentioned feeling watched, but attributed it to normal forest sounds. She told the camera that every little sound made her think something was watching her, but that it was just part of the wilderness experience. The tripod camera, left running during her dinner, captured something Maya was completely unaware of at the time. In the background, barely visible in the growing dusk, a massive shape moves between the trees. The movement is deliberate, careful, suggesting intelligence and curiosity rather than random animal behavior. Maya remained focused on engaging with her future audience, discussing the peaceful isolation of her chosen location. She explained that this was why she loved remote spots. No trail traffic, no noise pollution, just her and nature in its purest form. Morning footage from September 16th reveals disturbances around Maya's campsite that she initially failed to notice. Her backpack had been moved slightly from its original position. Her food cache, properly secured in a bear canister, showed signs of careful examination, not the destructive investigation typical of bears or other known wildlife. Maya attributed these small changes to wind or her own forgetfulness. She mentioned to her handheld camera that she could have sworn she left her pack somewhere else, but that she was probably just tired the night before, and that memory played tricks on you out there. During her nature walk documentation, Maya's camera occasionally caught shadows and movement at the edge of the frame. She was focused on discussing local flora and wildlife, pointing out Douglas fir characteristics and explaining leave-no-trace principles to her audience. The audio track, however, picked up distant calls that Maya didn't consciously register. Low, resonant sounds that later analysis would determine didn't match any cataloged Pacific Northwest wildlife. The most significant discovery came when Maya found large footprints crossing a muddy section of trail. Her initial reaction was dismissive. She told her camera that it looked like someone with really big hiking boots had come through, probably a size 14 or 15, and that it was a big hiker. Later measurement would reveal the prints were over 16 inches long with clear toe impressions and a stride length impossible for human locomotion. But at the time, Maya was focused on her content creation, not cryptozoological investigation. By the second day of her wilderness adventure, Maya began noticing that something felt fundamentally wrong with her environment. Her wilderness experience and survival training started triggering subconscious alarms that she couldn't initially identify. She mentioned to her camera during her morning routine that the forest seemed unusually quiet and that she hadn't heard any bird calls since waking up. She added that it was actually kind of weird for that time of year. During her exploration hike, Maya discovered broken branches in patterns that her trained eye recognized as deliberate rather than natural. Large limbs had been snapped at heights that suggested something much taller than a human had passed through the area. The breaks were fresh, occurring sometime during the night while she slept. Maya's wilderness knowledge began connecting dots that her conscious mind wasn't ready to accept. She explained to her camera while examining the evidence that the branch breaks didn't match any known animal behavior, that bears didn't typically break branches that high up, and that the pattern was too systematic for wind damage. Concerned about potential wildlife activity around her campsite, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She set up a motion-activated camera at her campsite perimeter, telling her audience that she just wanted to see what visited at night, and that it could be elk or bears, and that it was better to know what they were sharing the forest with. That evening's footage would capture something that defied explanation. While Maya slept peacefully in her tent, a massive silhouette moved past her camp. The shape was clearly bipedal. Most remarkably, it appeared to be observing Maya's campsite without disturbing anything, behavior further strengthening the curiosity rather than predatory intent theory. Maya's discovery of the night footage the following morning marked the turning point of her wilderness adventure. Initially excited about capturing what she assumed was a bear or elk, Maya began reviewing the motion camera footage on her camera's playback screen. She commented with excitement to her handheld camera that they definitely had a visitor the previous night and that it was going to be great content, adding that she was about to see what they caught. The gradual recognition of what she was actually seeing played out in real time on her recording. Her excitement slowly transformed into confusion, then disbelief, then genuine fear as she enhanced the footage and examined it more closely. She whispered to her camera that it wasn't a bear, that the proportions were all wrong, and that it was walking completely upright. The reality of her situation hit Maya like a physical blow. She was alone in the wilderness with an unknown creature of massive proportions. Her survival instincts kicked in immediately, overriding her content creation priorities. She told her camera that she needed to get out of there right away, that she didn't know what it was, but she wasn't staying to find out. Maya's handheld camera captured her panic and excitement as she broke camp in record time. Despite approaching darkness and the inherent dangers of night hiking, she made the decision to hike out immediately. Her footage shows her hands shaking as she secured her gear, her breathing rapid and shallow as adrenaline flooded her system. The hike to the trailhead parking lot took 3 hours in darkness, with Maya's headlamp providing the only illumination. Her camera captured her calling park rangers from her vehicle, her voice still trembling with the magnitude of what she had experienced. Maya's footage went viral within hours of posting, but unlike many viral cryptid videos, hers underwent immediate scientific scrutiny that validated rather than debunked her claims. The multiple camera angles, high-definition quality, and Maya's genuine reactions provided researchers with unprecedented documentation of a Bigfoot encounter. Dr. Patricia Williams, a digital forensics expert from the University of Washington, conducted extensive analysis of Maya's footage. Her findings were remarkable. The video shows no signs of digital manipulation. The metadata is consistent with the claimed recording dates and locations. Most importantly, the creature's movement patterns and proportions are consistent across multiple camera angles, something extremely difficult to fake. Primatologist Dr. James Rodriguez analyzed the creature's locomotion patterns captured in Maya's motion camera footage. The gait analysis reveals bipedal movement with characteristics unlike any known primate species. The stride length suggests a creature standing between 8 and 9 feet tall, with arm proportions that don't match human anatomy. Maya's transformation from wilderness vlogger to reluctant cryptozoology celebrity happened overnight. However, Maya has used her platform responsibly, advocating for Bigfoot habitat protection and supporting scientific research into cryptid phenomena. Maya later reflected in a follow-up video that she had never intended to become known for the Bigfoot incident. Her original goal was simply to share her love of the wilderness. Over time, she expressed that if her experience brought more awareness to the need to protect these creatures and their habitat, then the ordeal had at least served a purpose. It was supposed to be a normal hike, but instead, I experienced the scariest Bigfoot encounter ever. Whatever stalked me then was no bear. It was Bigfoot screaming with a sound that turned my blood to gravel. What followed was a split-second decision so reckless and desperate, it changed my life forever. I'm Caleb Harlan, and my back is pressed hard against the trunk of a Douglas fir, legs on fire, lungs trying to remember what a normal breathing rhythm feels like. The canopy above me is so thick it swallows midday whole and spits it out as something closer to late dusk. Everything down here tinted in a deep, layered green-black, like the light itself has been strained through a dozen overlapping membranes of shadow before it reaches the forest floor. I have been running. I can't tell you exactly how long. Long enough that my thighs are burning and my chest feels like it's being wrung out by hand. Long enough that the muscles in my calves have progressed from burning to a deeper, duller protest that I know from experience means the reserves are nearly gone. I am being observed by something that is close. I look down at the forest floor almost involuntarily, half expecting to catch movement at ground level. Some animal, something recognizable, something that fits into a category I have names for. I am still looking down when the world directly above me comes completely apart. The scream arrives before anything else does. Sudden, explosive, zero windup, detonating right overhead with no warning at all, like someone took the upper register of a woman's scream and ran it through a distortion pedal until the signal tore itself into metallic shreds. It lasts half a second, maybe less. In that half second, I have not looked up, have not processed what I'm hearing, am still somewhere between flinching and freezing, still stuck in the gap between stimulus and response. And then Bigfoot drops. I don't mean it jumped down, I mean it fell. Intentionally, purposefully, limbs drawn in tight against its body, torso angled like something that has done this before and knows exactly how to bring the weight down. Straight out of the canopy and straight toward the exact patch of ground where I had been sitting not half a second before. Bigfoot hits with an impact I feel in my back teeth. Dirt erupts. Pine needles blast outward in a ring 3 feet wide. Its hands, and I say hands, but what I mean are weapons, broad and thick-fingered with nails that are closer to claws than anything else, rake deep parallel grooves into the soil on landing, 4 inches deep at least, and those grooves stop maybe 3 inches from the front of my left boot. 3 inches? I am already scrambling backward on my hands and the heels of my feet before my brain has issued a single coherent instruction. I'm just moving, backward and sideways, across uneven root-laced ground, not looking where I'm going, not caring. The Sasquatch in front of me is 500 pounds at minimum. My brain is doing this assessment in real time with the dispassionate accuracy of pure adrenaline, and it is covered in dense, dark brown-black fur, matted with bark debris and fir needles, and its face is broad and brutally flat, and its eyes have found me with a focus that contains absolutely no ambiguity. Can I put enough distance between us before it decides I'm the target? Bigfoot does not pause, does not square up, does not vocalize again, does not perform any of the threat display behavior that gets discussed in the second-hand accounts. It simply moves, and the movement is already carrying a weapon. Something is in its right hand, a broken tree limb, maybe 4 feet long, cross-section as thick as my forearm. And I genuinely cannot tell you whether it grabbed that limb off the ground on landing or had it coming down from the canopy. The timeline doesn't allow for either, but both seem to have happened. Bigfoot raises the limb overhead with both hands, full extension above its head, and brings it straight down at my skull. This is not a warning. There is no arc to the swing, no feint, no hesitation in the mechanics, just a direct vertical overhead strike aimed with unambiguous intention to end the situation with one hit. I see the full body mechanics of it in a compressed fragment of a second. the hips rotating, the shoulders driving down, the entire mass behind the motion. I throw myself sideways, and the club hits the earth where my head was with a crack that I feel as much as here. It splits the soil. It snaps off smaller embedded branches underneath it, like dry sticks. My shoulder hits a root cluster, and something grinds in a way that I file away to worry about later, and I'm already pulling my legs under me, already scanning, already looking for anything I can use. Is there even a place left to hide, or have I run out of options? That's when I see the gap. 2 fallen logs, old ones, half rotted and gray, crossed at a low angle to my left, maybe 8 feet away. Between them, there's a crevice, barely wider than my shoulders, maybe 16 inches at the widest point, less than that where the bark is still on. I do not weigh my options. I do not have time to weigh my options. I move, I hit that gap at speed, and I drive myself into it headfirst, scraping both sides of my ribcage simultaneously, feeling fabric shred and then skin shred underneath it. And I wedge in deep enough that my chest is genuinely compressed between the logs, and I have to take short, deliberate half-breaths instead of full ones. My face ends up maybe 6 inches from the outer edge of the opening. My boots are behind me, heels probably visible from outside. I press in as deep as the space allows, and I go completely still. Will this cramped refuge hold, or is it just a trap waiting to snap? Bigfoot reaches me in seconds. It does not slow down or hesitate or try to understand what I've done. It lunges directly at the gap, both arms driving in at full extension, and those arms are enormous, not proportional to any primate I have a reference point for, built like load-bearing structural columns, and they wedge hard at the shoulders before they can reach me. I can hear the logs groan under the lateral pressure. Bigfoot's fingers are inside the gap anyway, all of them searching, and they are clawing through the air maybe 4 or 5 inches from my face. The nails leave visible tracks across the rotted wood and packed soil. I pull my head back as far as the confined space allows, straining my neck, trying to find 1 more inch of clearance that isn't there. I do not make a sound. There is a pause. Not retreat, not withdrawal, just recalculation. And then the tactics shift, and the assault on the logs themselves begins. Bigfoot stops trying to reach through the gap and starts trying to remove the barrier. It bites into the upper log, and I want to be precise about what I mean when I say that not gnawing, not exploratory contact, but a full deliberate bite applied with the intent to remove material. Wood fibers snap, chunks of rotted log come away. I can hear the specific sound of it, fibrous and wet, the way compromised wood sounds when it fails under direct force. Between bites, it uses the club, hammering down on top of the log structure with both hands, and each impact travels through the logs and into my back and spine like a shock wave, and each impact sends debris down into the crevice. Splinters, bark fragments, loose soil, all of it falling into my face and eyes, and I cannot move enough to clear any of it. My left eye is partially crusted. The smell inside the crevice is overwhelming. Rot and wet soil and sap and something else, something animal and hot and immediate that doesn't fit any category I have, but that every part of my body is reading as a threat signal. The logs are not collapsing, not yet, but material is being removed with every pass, and the timeline on that math is not favorable. Then the second scream comes in from somewhere to my left, and everything changes. Is it help or just more chaos about to land on me? Different pitch, slightly higher, slightly more fractured at the peak, but carrying the same absolute violence, the same total lack of preamble. A second Bigfoot hits the ground, maybe 25 feet from my position, not from as high as the first one dropped, but fast and low, and moving before it has fully landed. It doesn't waste a single beat before covering the distance toward the first one, and the first Bigfoot, mid-swing on the logs, mid-assault on my position, spins on it with an immediacy that tells me exactly how much thought went into abandoning the attack on me. 0. The calculation took no time because there was no calculation. Are they turning on each other before I even get a chance to escape? The 2 Bigfoot collide a second later. Not gradually, not with a closing approach, just full mass impact at speed, 2 enormous bodies trying to occupy the same point in space. The sound is percussive and deep, and I feel the ground move through the logs and through my compressed ribcage. There is no circling, there is no posturing or display. The fight opens at full intensity in the first second and does not step down from there. I am wedged inside a rotting log in the dark, splinters embedding themselves in both eyes and cutting small lines of blood across my eyelids, watching two Bigfoot tear into each other not 30 feet from my face. I can hear their breathing, deep, guttural, ragged bursts, smell the musky heat of their fur, the earthy tang of upturned soil and snapped wood. Every movement sends vibrations through the log I am wedged in, but I do not shift, do not adjust more than necessary to maintain position. My chest tightens instinctively, and I do not breathe through my mouth for fear of even the faintest sound. I do not move anything. I do not absolutely have to move. Every nerve is taut. Every muscle is ready. I am trying, almost superstitiously, to become part of the log, to merge with the wood, the rot, the earth around me, to occupy no space of my own, to vanish from the awareness of the creatures tearing the forest apart mere yards away. The fight does not pause. The two Bigfoot crash into a fallen sapling and send it snapping like a dry whip. One shoves the other backward into a cluster of ferns and moss, sending debris flying in all directions. Their arms lash outward, catching on each other's torsos, slamming into tree trunks, and rolling over exposed roots. Every hit sends a jolt through the ground, through the logs, through me. Their massive bodies crush small shrubs underfoot, scatter loose rock, and churn the forest floor into dark, uneven furrows. I track every movement through narrow gaps in the rotting log, catching glimpses of fur, arms, shoulders, faces contorted in violent exertion, teeth bared, claws extended. I am pinned, yet hyper-aware. Every second stretches long enough to feel the air vibrate from each impact. If one of them shifts attention even slightly, if their gaze flickers toward me, I know in an instant that my survival depends on absolute stillness. The chaos escalates further. One Bigfoot swings both arms in a coordinated shove, almost imperceptibly timed, and the other braces, legs wide, muscles coiled. Momentum carries both forward, colliding with a nearby trunk, bark shearing under the weight of massive bodies. Branches splinter above me, needles rain down, and the log I occupy vibrates with the shock. I am pressed tighter into the decay, heart hammering, every sense screaming the same urgent warning. Do not move, do not breathe, do not exist in a way they can detect. The fight's volume, its physical presence, fills every inch of the forest within 20 feet, the air dense with the scent of disturbed earth, the metallic tang of dirt and bark, the animal musk of exertion. And yet I remain utterly still, an extension of the rotting wood, invisible by sheer force of stillness and terror. And then the third Sasquatch arrives before I have time to process the second one. Is this the end, or does the chaos work in my favor? I hear it first, a crash through lower canopy 20 feet up. The sound of something massive simply displacing material rather than navigating around it. Branches giving way under weight and force. And then it hits the ground with an impact that reorganizes the local topography in a way that is not metaphorical. I can see it through the gaps between the logs, larger than the other two, or at least that's how it registers in the chaos. And louder, and moving with a weight that makes the previous two look like a preamble. Now all three of them are in the same 30-foot radius, and the energy in that space shifts into something that has no accurate name. They vocalize at each other, not sustained roars, nothing theatrical, but short detonating screams and guttural burst sounds, fast and overlapping. And they do this while pressing into each other's space aggressively, bodies almost touching, volume escalating. And this argument, this exchange, this whatever it is, lasts maybe 4 seconds before the whole thing pivots into the most violent, sustained physical encounter I have ever been present for in my life. Can I stay hidden while the epicenter of destruction unfolds so close? One Bigfoot grabs another by both shoulders, full grip, fingers visibly sinking into fur and flesh, and drives it backward into a tree trunk. The tree is probably 20 inches across, and it shudders on impact. I hear the wood stress. Branches shake loose from 30 or 40 feet up and fall through the canopy. Bigfoot that got driven into the trunk bounces off and delivers a full-arm lateral blow immediately. No recovery time, aimed at the ribs and connecting with the sound that carries. The third. Bigfoot enters the exchange from the side with a broken limb it's using as a weapon, sweeping it across the back of the nearest one, and then the biting starts. constant, purposeful, targeted biting, not panic, not defensive, aimed at shoulders, the back of the neck, the upper arms, anywhere a grip can be established and a hold can be built or material can be pulled away. Dark blood begins to appear in the fur and not in small amounts. It soaks in and mats the fur and catches what little light reaches the forest floor and looks nearly black. The smell of it reaches me inside the crevice. It is copper and iron and something rawer underneath that. One Bigfoot gets partially lifted, not fully off the ground, but a hip and shoulder maneuver gets its feet clear for a moment and it gets thrown laterally. It lands on its side and the impact churns the forest floor, exposes root systems that have been underground for decades, sends a spray of dark soil and shattered ground. Cover in a wide radius. It is upright before I have finished registering that it went down. The area between the three of them is being systematically destroyed. Soil churned into loose, dark earth, roots exposed and snapped, bark stripped from 3 or 4 nearby trunks where bodies have been pressed or thrown, fir needles scattered across a 20-foot radius until the ground underneath is bare. One Bigfoot gets the second one down to a knee and goes for the throat with both hands, fingers clamping, and holds it for maybe 2 seconds before the third drags it backward by the fur of its shoulders and the grip breaks. The sequence resets. They start again. The intensity does not decrease between iterations. It climbs. How much destruction can the forest endure before the chaos reaches me? I am watching all of this through gaps in the logs. The gaps are inches from my face. I am not moving. I am not making a sound. I am absolutely and completely aware that if any one of the 3 of them shifts their attention toward my position even briefly, everything changes immediately and in ways I don't survive. One of Bigfoot takes a simultaneous 2-handed shove from both of the others and goes backward, directly into my log cover. The impact is a different category of event. The entire structure torques violently. One of the main logs, the upper one, the one that has been taking the club strikes, cracks along a fault line it probably developed years ago and has been waiting for an excuse to use. The crevice widens. Light cuts in from the left side where the crack is opened. Actual exterior light, gray, green, and cold. And the tight compression that has been holding me in place disappears. My rib cage has room. My left arm has movement. Splinters rain down into my face from the split log. Another log shifts under me, and the whole geometry of the shelter changes in under a second. The gap that I squeezed into is now visible from outside. From ground level, from the right angle, from directly in front of where the crack opened, you can see into the crevice. You can see my face. You can see me. Will the moment they discover me end everything? One of the Bigfoot sees me. Its head snaps toward the opening with a speed and precision that does not fit anything that size. No tracking lag, no gradual focus, just an instantaneous directional lock, head turning and stopping on my position as if on a pivot. Its eyes find mine through the gap. This is direct, unmistakable eye contact, and it lasts a full second, maybe slightly longer, which in this context is long enough to be geological. I have spent a lot of time in the field. I have had plenty of moments of ambiguity, wondering if I was being watched, wondering if an animal had detected me or was simply looking in my direction by coincidence. This is not one of those moments. This is the opposite of ambiguity. It sees me. It knows what I am. The decision has already been made before the eye contact ends. It disengages from the other two. It takes less than a second, and Bigfoot comes for the gap. Do I have the speed and wits to survive this direct assault? I come out of the logs the only way available, forward, fast, not standing up so much as exploding outward and converting the momentum of the exit directly into a running stride without any pause in between. There is no direction I have planned. There is no destination in my head. There is a downhill slope in front of me and dense timber, and I take the densest available line at full speed because dense means narrower gaps, and narrower gaps mean something with that body width has to decelerate to navigate them. Roots cross the ground in every direction, and I hit them at different angles with both feet and stumble twice and correct without reducing pace. Low branches hit my face and my chest. Something catches my left arm above the elbow and opens the skin, and I feel the heat of it. but not the pain yet. That comes later. Behind me, all 3 Bigfoot are in pursuit. I know this because I can hear them, and the hearing is not ambiguous. Heavy, fast footfalls that communicate through the ground as much as the air. And the sound of 3 animals that size moving at speed through dense timber is a physical phenomenon, something your sternum picks up before your ears fully process it. They are not trying to be quiet. They are not pacing themselves. They are coming. These Bigfoot are faster than me on open ground. I already know this from the way the first one dropped. That kind of power doesn't slow down on flat terrain. But I am not giving them open ground. I am threading between trees with gaps that make me slow down less than something twice my shoulder width, cutting angles through tight channels between root clusters and low branches, staying in the timber where my size is a relative advantage. Every narrow gap buys me fractions of a second compound. That is the math I am running in the back of my head, while the front of my head is entirely occupied with not dying. Are these fractions of a second enough to keep me ahead? The sound behind me is constant, and it is organized, and it is gaining. 3 sets of footfalls, each one heavy enough to resonate, and between them, the occasional crash of a branch being taken out rather than ducked, the occasional grunt of something large navigating an obstacle at speed. They communicate while they run, short, clipped vocalizations, nothing I can parse but clearly purposeful, and the fact that they are coordinating while pursuing me is a piece of information I do not have time to sit with, but that lands in my chest with real weight. I cut left hard around a tight cluster of 3 trees, and the gap between the last 2 is maybe 18 inches, and I turn my shoulders and scrape through, and I hear the closest set of footfalls adjust. Not stop, adjust, finding another line. Around the outside, I hear one of them hit something solid behind me, a trunk, a root cluster, something fixed, and the sound of impact is significant, and the footfall pattern changes after it. One set of heavy steps drops out of the rhythm. 2 Bigfoot continue. I don't celebrate and I don't adjust. I keep going. Is survival now about endurance, luck, or both? One of the Bigfoot screams, and it is close. Not 40 feet back, maybe 15, maybe closer. The sound is directional and it is aimed at me, and it is close enough that I can hear the texture of it, the way the pitch breaks and shreds at the top end. I push harder. My legs are past the point of fine motor reliability, and I am operating on the crude version. Swing and land and push and repeat, hoping the ground keeps cooperating, hoping the next root cluster is passable, hoping the gap between the next 2 trees is wide enough. The timber is beginning to space out. I can see more light ahead. The ground is getting less technical, less obstructed, and that is a mixed development. Better footing for me, but fewer tight gaps to use as speed differentials. I take what the terrain is giving me, and I run. A crash behind me, different from footfalls, different from a collision with a tree. This is the sound of a large mass going lateral, losing its feet, going down. Heavy and sudden, and followed by a few seconds of thrashing, and then the footfall pattern behind me drops to 1 set, then less than 1 set, then staggered and inconsistent. Branches snap behind me once, twice, then silence. Not fading, not trailing off into the distance. Gone. I break into an open stretch. Real light, sparse trees, the feel of the dense forest releasing me into something less compressed. The sounds behind me are absent. Not fading, absent. I do not turn around. I do not slow down to evaluate. I run until my legs simply cannot sustain the pace any longer, and then I collapse into a walk that is barely more organized than falling forward 1 step at a time. I never look back. That felt like the right call at the moment, and it still does. Whatever was moving in those trees, whatever that 3-body collision of something ancient and enormous and categorically indifferent to my presence actually constituted, it stayed in the timber. I made it out with a torn jacket, a gash above the left elbow that needed to be closed, a shoulder that went purple-green over the following 2 days, and a left eye that was partially crusted shut from debris for the better part of an evening. I made it out, and the forest behind me, when I finally stopped moving and stood still enough to listen, was completely and perfectly silent. You won't believe what I just watched. My own camera caught Bigfoot just 10 feet away, and I had no idea the Sasquatch was even there. Every second of that footage is pure terror, but it's the moment in the trees that still haunts me, because I almost made a brutal mistake. I'm watching the clip from the beginning, and the trail looks empty. Clear sky through the canopy, maybe 60 degrees. The kind of October morning that makes you feel like you own the forest. My footsteps are steady. My breathing is calm. The GoPro captures everything with the crisp indifference of a machine that doesn't feel fear. And right there in the frame behind me, in the 10th minute, 43 seconds, about 40 yards away, something is standing completely still in the tree line. I didn't see it when I was walking. I see it now. Tall, dark, built like something that has never once been afraid of anything alive. Bigfoot had already been there for who knows how long, watching me move down that trail like it. Was studying how I walked. The shape of it is wrong in a way that's hard to explain without sounding like you've lost your mind. It wasn't the silhouette of a bear. It wasn't the broken canopy playing tricks on shadows. Sasquatch was upright, composed, and deliberately positioned just far enough inside the tree line to be invisible, unless you knew exactly what to look for. I've gone back to that frame dozens of times now, zooming in until the image breaks apart into pixels. And every time I come back to the same conclusion. Whatever was standing there, it had chosen that spot on purpose. There was nothing accidental about its position. The angle, the cover, the stillness, that takes thought. Back on the trail in real time, I had no idea. The footage shows me walking at a comfortable pace, occasionally glancing at the ground to watch my footing, pausing once to check my phone for a signal that wasn't there. Standard stuff. But the audio on the GoPro is better than I remembered. And when I crank the volume and listen closely, I can already hear it. Faint but rhythmic low-frequency clicks coming from somewhere in the trees to my left. It wasn't birds nor insects. It was something deliberate, the kind of sound that lives at the bottom of your ear before it registers as a sound at all. Was that click meant to warn me or lure me? I remember stopping. The footage confirms it. I planted both feet and stood there for almost 20 seconds, head tilted, scanning the tree line to my left. Nothing moved. Nothing was visible. And here's what gets me when I watch it back now. I was looking in exactly the wrong direction. Based on Bigfoot's position the first time the camera caught a glimpse of it, I have a feeling that the Sasquatch was behind me and slightly right, motionless, watching me search for it in the wrong quadrant of forest. I was so confident in my instincts pointing me left that I never thought to turn fully around. Sasquatch used that. Whether it was conscious misdirection or just patience, the result was the same. I looked, found nothing, and kept walking. That's when I reached up and adjusted the GoPro. The clip shows my hand crossing the lens, and for half a second, the camera tilts upward at about 30 degrees, catching the mid-canopy instead of the trail. And I have watched that half-second frame by frame more times than I can count, because that's when Bigfoot appears again. Higher now, not on the ground. Sasquatch is in the lower branches of a large oak, maybe 40 feet off the trail, perched in a position that makes zero anatomical sense for something that must weigh upward of 500 pounds. But there it is. And the face. The face is what I can't let go of. It's turned directly toward the camera, not toward me, toward the lens, as if it understood what the lens was. The eyes are deep set and dark, and there is nothing blank about them. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Bigfoot looked like it was thinking. I reattached the mount, the camera leveled back out, and the trail snapped back into frame. And immediately, the clicking returned. But this time, it was louder. The gap between each click had shortened, or maybe it was coming from closer, or both. My body language in the footage shifts visibly. My shoulders come up half an inch. My stride gets tighter. I start scanning left and right with short glances instead of steady forward focus. I know that posture. That's the posture of someone whose nervous system is sending massive red flags that their conscious brain hasn't sorted into words yet. I think that's the moment my instincts started clocking in ahead of my thoughts. I just hadn't caught up yet, and Bigfoot was still right there behind me, closing the gap by degrees. How much closer could it get before I realized I was being hunted? I've spent time in thick backcountry. I've camped alone at elevation, hiked out at 3 in the morning, navigated by feel more than once. The woods have never made me feel small. That changed on this trail, on this morning, and I can pinpoint the exact moment in the footage, the moment my stride broke. Not a stumble, not a stop. Just a half-second hesitation in the rhythm, the kind your body makes when the math stops adding up. One foot came down a little softer than it should have. I picked up my pace. Not running, not yet, but moving with the kind of urgency that doesn't come from logic. It comes from somewhere older than logic. The footage starts to shake now. Not badly, just enough to tell you the gait has changed. I'm moving somewhere between a fast walk and a trot, and my head is doing that thing where it keeps flicking backward without fully committing to a look. I remember the feeling exactly. I wanted to look back, and I didn't want to look back, because somewhere in the meat of my brain, I already suspected that looking back would show me something I couldn't unsee. So I kept moving, and Bigfoot kept moving too. What happens next in the footage is the part I had to watch 4 times before I could accept what I was seeing. I had pushed my pace up to something close to a jog, and the camera was bobbing enough to make the background choppy, but not so choppy that you miss it. Behind me, maybe 30 feet back, a shape moves between 2 tree trunks. One smooth, unhurried stride. The spacing between those trunks was at least 8 feet across. Bigfoot cleared that gap in a single step. Not a leap, but just a step. And in the brief moment when the shape was fully visible between the trees, upright, broad, moving with the fluid indifference of something that does not need to rush, I could see it wasn't running. It was walking, just walking, keeping pace with a human jogging. I honestly think, watching it now, that Bigfoot could have caught me whenever it decided to. It was toying with me. That's the thought that sits in my chest like a stone. Was this predator simply patient, or testing me for something worse? Growing up Navajo, I'd been taught to trust the land and to respect what watches from it. Something about the clicks and low rustles behind me set my nerves screaming. I knew this forest better than most. Every fallen log, every narrow deer path was mapped in my head. If I stayed on the main paved trail, it would take at least 20 minutes to reach the parking area. But cutting through this older, tighter forest, I could shave off almost 10 minutes. 10 minutes didn't seem like much, but when Bigfoot is closing in at a pace you can't measure, 10 minutes could be the difference between getting out and getting caught. I made the turn without hesitation, but it wasn't just instinct. My feet carried me left before my mind even fully caught up. I cut hard off the main trail. There's a deer path I've used before, cuts diagonally through a section of older forest and shaves almost a quarter mile off the route back to the parking area. Tighter canopy, rougher ground, but faster if you know it. I knew it. I took it without slowing down, ducking the first low branch by memory and hitting the uneven ground of the old deer path at full stride. The terrain got worse immediately. Exposed roots, soft spots where the soil had gone damp from a creek runoff somewhere below. Branches at shin level that caught my feet if I wasn't lifting high enough. The GoPro captured all of it, the world swinging and jerking as I worked through the brush, my breathing now audible on the mic, ragged but controlled. And then the clicking stopped, just stopped, mid-sequence, as if a switch had been thrown. And the silence that replaced it was worse. Because silence in a forest that has been making sound means something decided to go quiet. I felt the change in the air before I processed the audio shift. Everything around me became very still in the way that prey animals go still when something large has just entered their space. What filled the silence instead was something lower, a rhythmic sound I don't have a clean word for. Not a vocalization, not a knock. More like a deep, resonant pressure that hit the chest before the ears. It was spaced out and deliberate. It felt less like communication and more like the sound of something that knew I could hear it and wanted me to know that. I'm not someone who leans into the dramatic, but I will say this plainly. It felt like Bigfoot was controlling the pace. Like the Sasquatch had shifted from observation to something more intentional and was marking time as it came. Was it orchestrating my every move, step by step? I was moving hard through the deer path when I made my worst decision. I slowed down, just a fraction, just enough to try to get a bearing on where the sound was coming from. And in that half second of reduced speed, I turned my head back over my left shoulder. The camera caught what my eyes caught. Bigfoot was there, not 30 feet back this time, not a silhouette between trees. Close enough that I could make out the mass of it moving through the brush toward me with a kind of steady, ground-eating locomotion that looked nothing like a run, but covered ground like one. Sasquatch wasn't hesitating. It wasn't stopping to observe. It was advancing. and the distance between us had collapsed to something that made the word escape feel suddenly fragile. I took off in a full sprint. No more pacing, no more managing my footing on the uneven ground. I just went, and I accepted every stumble and root catch as the cost of forward motion. The GoPro footage from this stretch is chaotic. Sky, ground, branches, blur. But there are frames where the background stabilizes just long enough to see behind me. And in 2 of those frames, Bigfoot is visible, moving through the brush in long, smooth strides, angled toward me, not away. Sasquatch wasn't spooked by the sprint. It responded to it. The pace increased. There was no frantic energy in those strides, no sign of exertion, just the mechanical, metronomic movement of something that was built for this, in terrain that it had known far longer than I had. And the scariest part? He was 10 feet away from me. I've never felt fear like that in my life. I want to be specific about that. I've been in situations in the backcountry that were objectively more dangerous. A rockfall at elevation, a flash flood in a desert canyon, a close encounter with a black bear that ended fine but escalated fast. In all of those, the fear was manageable because the threat followed rules I understood. This was different. This was the specific terror of being pursued by something that was better at the terrain than I was, faster than I was, and not behaving like anything I had a category for. How do you survive when the rules themselves have changed? Then the rocks started. The first one hit the ground to my right with a crack that I felt in my teeth. Not a random falling branch, not a tumbling stone dislodged by movement upstream. It came in from the side, horizontal, at knee height, and struck a root hard enough to split it. I didn't stop. The second one caught my shoulder. It wasn't massive, maybe the size of a baseball, but it hit with enough force to send a spike of pain down into my elbow and throw my balance just enough to make me grab a sapling for support. I used the sapling to pivot and keep my momentum going without going down. The third one caught me in the upper back, mid-stride, and that one nearly buckled me. Bigfoot was throwing them, not rolling them, not kicking them loose. Full on, actually throwing them. Overhead with accuracy, while in motion through heavy brush. I can't tell you exactly how I know the difference, but I know it the same way you know when a punch is aimed versus when it's wild. The rocks were landing in front of me, and beside me, and behind me, and the pattern wasn't random scatter, it was bracketing. Sasquatch was boxing in my path, throwing ahead of where I was headed to steer me. I stumbled over a root, went down on one knee, got back up in what felt like the same motion, and kept running. That's when it landed. Not as a thought at first, more as a sensation, a wrongness in the geometry of where I was versus where I should have been. I'd been running this deer path for almost 4 minutes, and I should have been breaking into the secondary fire road by now. I should have been able to see the open sky ahead through the canopy thinning. Instead, the trees were getting denser. The ground was rising. I was heading northeast instead of northwest, and the only way I had gotten there was by following the path of least resistance. When the rocks came in from the sides, had I already been trapped without realizing it? I wasn't escaping. I was being steered. Every time I'd had to dodge, right when a rock hit my left when one hit ahead of me to the right. I had turned, incrementally away from the exit. Sasquatch hadn't been trying to hit me cleanly. It had been redirecting me. The rocks were a herding tool. I was deep in the denser section of the forest now, the canopy thick enough that it had dropped the ambient light by a full level, and I had zero visual on any recognizable landmark. I was exactly where Bigfoot wanted me, and it stopped feeling like a chase. It started feeling like something else, something with an endpoint where I am deep in the forest, dead. I forced myself to stop running and think for 3 seconds. 3 seconds, which felt like 3 hours. I pulled up the mental map of the area. The creek ran south, the ridge was east, the parking lot was west and low. I needed to go downhill and left, regardless of what that put between me and whatever was in those trees. I adjusted course, pushing through brush now, instead of following the path, taking the harder route, because the harder route was the right one. Then the rocks stopped entirely, and Bigfoot closed the distance. I know this because I heard it. Not footsteps, not snapping branches, but a single heavy impact on the ground, maybe 15 feet behind me, like something had dropped its full weight forward in one lunge. The sound was so massive and so close that my legs nearly gave out. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. I just pushed every last thing I had into my legs and ran harder than I have ever run in my life, and the GoPro footage confirms it. The camera shaking so violently that only every fourth or fifth frame is even decipherable. Was I about to find out just how close it could really get? The footage shows me stumbling badly over an exposed root, catching myself on a tree trunk with my forearm hard enough to leave a bruise that still hurts as I watch this. What the mic caught at that exact moment is something I've had to listen to a dozen times to fully accept. A sound directly behind me, guttural and low. Not a roar, not a scream, just a single deep exhalation of something that was right there. Not 30 feet back, not 20, it was right there. The GoPro audio puts it at maybe 8 feet. If I had gone down on that route, I don't think I would have gotten back up. I hit a slope without warning and went with it, half running, half sliding down a 15-foot grade of loose shale and dead leaves, grabbing at anything to stay upright. My right knee went into the ground, came back up, and I was still moving. That's what the body does when everything else switches off. The slope angled me south, and I took it, because south was away, and away was the only direction that mattered. Behind me on that slope, the footage catches a shape dropping into the upper edge of the frame. Not sliding, not stumbling. It was controlled. Sasquatch came down that grade like it had done it 1,000 times. The trees thinned just slightly ahead. Not a clearing, just older growth with more space between trunks. And I hit that section at full sprint. That's when Bigfoot made its move. The footage shows a shadow crossing fast from my right, cutting in at an angle, closing the gap with sudden acceleration I hadn't seen from it before. Sasquatch had been pacing itself. The whole time, it had been pacing itself, and now it wasn't. Could I survive a sudden burst from something built to outlast me? But before we get into that, you need to see this, because I found something else while watching this footage. Evidence and more discoveries that I can't put on YouTube. Things that were taken down, ignored, or completely removed. I gathered everything into one file. If you want to see it, it's in the description. Now back to the story. I screamed. Didn't plan to. It just came out, raw and primal, captured perfectly on the GoPro mic. I cut left so hard my feet nearly crossed, and I almost went down, barely staying upright, through something closer to controlled falling than running. Bigfoot adjusted instantly. The footage shows the shadow shifting course to match me. The gap now under 20 feet, the canopy shaking from its movement overhead in one frame. Overhead, like it had used a low branch as a pivot point. The geometry of it didn't make sense for something that size, and it didn't matter because it was happening. My lungs were burning in a way I hadn't felt ever. The footing was wet from creek drainage seeping up through the soil, and every third step my foot slid before catching. I could feel Bigfoot back there, not as a sound anymore, but as pressure. The way air moves differently when something large displaces it. Sasquatch was close enough that I could feel the wake of it. I've told people this, and they look at me like I'm exaggerating. I'm not. A branch caught me across the face. One I ran directly into at full speed, split my lower lip, and filled my mouth with blood. I didn't slow down. My vision went briefly white at the edges, and I didn't slow down. The footage from this stretch is almost unusable, just violent shaking and strobing light through branches. But in one clear frame, you can see Bigfoot's arm, not its whole body. Its arm extended, reaching. It was close enough to reach. That frame is the one I can barely look at because the hand is open. I would have been gone. I don't know if I made a sound when I saw what was ahead. A gray light through the trees, diffuse, flat, the specific quality of light that means open sky and open ground. A clearing. I hit the brush at the edge without slowing, ducked under a low branch by instinct, and exploded out the other side at a dead sprint and ran directly into a human being. The collision was violent. I hit him shoulder first at full running speed, and we both went down, him backwards into a tarp of gear, me rolling hard over his torso and landing on my hands in the dirt. Two other men spun around at the sound, and for one suspended second, everybody froze. Me on the ground, blood on my lip, chest heaving, him flat on his back in his own equipment, the other two with their hands halfway to things at their hips. The gear on the tarp was not recreational. Poachers, mid-setup, and I had crashed into the middle of their operation like a man falling out of the sky. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then one of them barked something low at the others, and they all turned toward the tree line I'd just come through. I turned too. Nothing. No sound, no movement, no shape at the edge of the clearing. Bigfoot was gone, fully, completely gone, as if the sight of armed humans had ended the calculation mid-step. I stood there with my hands shaking and understood with total clarity that I had not made it out because I outran something. I made it out because something decided to stop. I pulled the footage that night. I watched it 3 times straight through and couldn't sleep. What I found in those early frames, Bigfoot already there, 10 feet behind me. Watching didn't shock me. What shocked me was the last frame. Sasquatch in the trees, eyes locked on me, arm reaching forward as if it could snatch me at any second. Watching it now, I can still feel that intent pressing in. And I know, if I'd hesitated for even a second, Bigfoot would have finished the job. That's the part that haunts me. On September 15, 2018, search teams found Cecilia Mangrove's empty campsite in Olympic National Forest, Washington. She was a scientist who had left 3 days earlier, but her broken phone and camera gear hinted she'd encountered something unusual in the wilderness, sparking the most mysterious disappearance in the Pacific Northwest.
It's an elusive creature.
Cecilia, a 29-year-old environmental scientist and avid hiker from Portland, Oregon, set out on September 11, 2018. She packed her gear for what should have been a routine 3-day expedition. The destination was Whisper Creek Trail in Olympic National Forest, a place so isolated that park rangers joked it saw more bears than hikers. But that's exactly what made it perfect for Cecilia's research on old-growth forest recovery. What she didn't realize was just how far from civilization she was traveling, or that this remote stretch of forest, rarely visited by humans, might be hiding something extraordinary, something out of legend, something the locals whispered about but few had ever seen, and something they called Bigfoot. What her family didn't know was that Cecilia had spent that day methodically documenting the forest. Between 6 and 8 p.m. on September 11th, she took over 100 photos, far more than her usual evening routine. As an environmental scientist studying forest recovery, she typically photographed tree formations and growth patterns. But that evening was different. Her camera focused on areas where vegetation grew unusually thick and trees had strange, irregular shapes. Her research journal, found later at the campsite, revealed why. Detailed notes described strange wildlife signs and unusual disturbances in the forest floor. The final entry, dated September 11th at 10:30 p.m., described something large that had recently moved through the area. Broken branches 8 feet high and unusual track marks near the creek. She planned to investigate further the next day. The weather stayed perfect throughout the night, with clear skies and calm winds. According to weather data, conditions were ideal for the wildlife watching and photography work that Cecilia had planned for the next day. Nothing in the weather suggested any reason to worry about her safety or the success of her trip. September 12, 2018, started like any other day for people waiting to hear from Cecilia Mangrove. According to the detailed plan she had submitted to both her employer and the Olympic National Forest Ranger Station, she was supposed to pack up camp early and hike the remaining 4 miles to Summit Lake, where she planned to set up her main research base. No one expected to hear from her during this day, since the deeper wilderness areas of Whisper Creek Trail had no cell phone coverage. Cecilia had noted this in her planning documents and had also informed both her brother Marcus and her boss. Her satellite communication device, a Garmin InReach Explorer that she carried on all solo trips, was set to send automatic location signals every 4 hours during daylight. The device sent its final signal at 6:18 a.m. on September 12th, showing her position at the campsite where she had spent the night. After that time, the device went completely silent. This was unusual, but not immediately scary, since satellite coverage could be spotty in the thick forest of the Olympic Peninsula. September 13th was the day Cecilia was supposed to come back. Her plan said she would pack up camp at Summit Lake by 8 a.m. and hike back to the trailhead, getting there by 4 p.m. Marcus Mangrove had arranged to meet her for dinner in Portland that evening, something they always did after each of her major solo trips. When 6 p.m. came and went without a word from his sister, Marcus started calling her cell phone. All calls went straight to voicemail. At first, Marcus wasn't too worried. Cecilia had been late coming back from hikes before, usually because she found something interesting to research, or the trail was harder than expected. She was careful about safety, but also passionate about her work, and he knew she might stay longer if she discovered something scientifically important. However, as the evening went on and his calls kept going unanswered, he started to worry more. By 10 p.m. on September 13th, Marcus had left 12 voicemails and sent many text messages. He also checked Cecilia's Instagram account, hoping to see a post explaining why she was late, but her last update was still the campfire photo from September 11th. This was very unusual. Cecilia usually posted daily during her trips, and she had never gone more than 24 hours without some form of communication during a solo hike. September 14th brought more worry. Cecilia was scheduled for a 9 a.m. conference call with her research team at work, something she had never missed. When she didn't join the call, her supervisor, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, immediately contacted Marcus. By noon, both Marcus and Dr. Walsh had driven to the Whisper Creek trailhead, where they found Cecilia's Honda CR-V exactly where she had parked it 3 days earlier. The car was locked and undisturbed. Her spare key, which she always hid in a magnetic case under the rear bumper, was still there. Inside the car, they found her purse, wallet, and a detailed backup copy of her research notes, things she never would have left behind if she had returned safely. Most concerning was finding her emergency contact card on the dashboard, which listed Marcus's phone number and included specific instructions about when to contact authorities if she failed to return. At 2:47 p.m. on September 14th, Marcus called the Olympic National Forest Ranger Station to report his sister missing. Ranger Elena Vasquez, who had processed Cecilia's backcountry permit, immediately understood how serious the situation was. Cecilia was known to park staff as an experienced and reliable hiker who always followed safety rules. Her failure to return as scheduled was completely unlike her. The first response was quick but limited. 2 park rangers hiked the first 3 miles of Whisper Creek Trail that afternoon, calling Cecilia's name and looking for any signs of her. They found nothing unusual on the main trail and returned to organize a bigger search effort for the next day. September 15th marked the beginning of the official search and rescue operation. At dawn, a team of 12 searchers, including park rangers, volunteer search and rescue people, and a dog unit, entered the Whisper Creek Trail. The search team had GPS devices, emergency medical supplies, and communication equipment to coordinate their efforts across the challenging terrain. The most important breakthrough in Cecilia Mangrove's disappearance came from finding her iPhone 8, discovered by search and rescue teams 50 yards downstream from her abandoned campsite. The device was lodged partly underwater in Whisper Creek, trapped between 2 rocks in shallow water. Despite significant water damage and a badly cracked screen, crime lab technicians were able to recover much of the phone's data, though some files were partially corrupted. What they could reconstruct revealed a chilling sequence of events that appeared to occur in the early morning hours of September 12, 2018. According to the phone's metadata, Cecilia's final photo sequence began at exactly 6:23 a.m. The first image was deceptively ordinary, a golden sunrise streaming through the trees, captured from inside her tent. The composition suggested she had woken naturally, starting her day with routine environmental documentation, photographing the forest floor and light patterns. The photo was calm, almost serene, masking the ominous events about to unfold. 2 minutes later, at 6:25 a.m., the second photo marked a dramatic shift. Cecilia had intentionally focused on a massive footprint pressed deep into the muddy ground beside Whisper Creek. Analysis revealed the print measured approximately 18.5 inches long and 7.2 inches wide, with clearly defined toe impressions and a skin-like texture along the pads. The depth suggested the creature weighed far more than any known wildlife in the Olympic Peninsula. It was unlike a bear, elk or human, and the freshness of the imprint suggested it had been made while she slept in her tent just yards away. At 6:28 a.m., Cecilia's third photo captured the tree line about 30 yards from her campsite. At first glance, it seemed like a routine forest shot, but digital enhancement revealed a dark, upright silhouette partially hidden among the evergreen branches. The figure appeared unusually tall, roughly 8 feet, and moved in a way that didn't match any known animal in the region. Judging by the angle and framing, Cecilia seemed to have paused briefly, adjusting her camera to capture the figure without drawing attention. Leaves rustled beneath it, branches snapped softly, and a shadow swept across the clearing. Even through her scientific lens, the scene was extraordinary, unsettling, and completely unexpected. The fourth photo, taken at 6:31 a.m., showed Cecilia's face, wide-eyed and tense, her mouth slightly open as if holding her breath. Reflections in her eyes hinted at movement in the tree line, though the background remained blurry. The image captured both her terror and the realization that she was witnessing something extraordinary, something unlike any known wildlife. At 6:34 a.m., Cecilia's phone recorded a 47-second audio clip that sent chills through forensic analysts. Her whispering voice, punctuated by shallow, rapid breaths, indicated panic but also intentional documentation. Overlapping her voice were the sounds of footsteps on leaves, snapping twigs, and a low, guttural noise. The tonal quality of the sound was unlike any known mammal or bird call in the region. Midway through the clip, Cecilia's voice surged, narrating rapidly and carefully, noting movement, proximity, and behaviors of whatever she had encountered. Then, abruptly, a loud crack, a tree branch breaking under massive weight, ended the recording, followed by static. The phone likely dropped or was damaged in the scramble that followed. Between 6:25 and 6:36 a.m., her camera, audio and drafts, revealed an escalating encounter. She typed 2 urgent messages she never sent. One to her brother, Marcus, instructing him to check the photos if anything happened, and one to her supervisor, explaining she had discovered something extraordinary that could revolutionize her ecological reports. The unsent messages implied that Cecilia's observation window had been brief, minutes, possibly seconds, before her situation became dire. During the early part of this period, her recordings and notes captured a mix of careful scientific observation and growing alarm. Every detail, the massive footprint, the distant silhouette in the tree line, and the unusual guttural sounds, was documented meticulously, highlighting her instinct to record what she was witnessing even as the encounter intensified. The GPS data from her phone painted a frantic picture. After the 6:31 a.m. photo, the device tracked rapid movement away from the campsite, approximately 200 yards in under 3 minutes. Her path was erratic, sudden stops, abrupt changes in direction, and repeated backtracking, suggesting she was moving to both observe and evade. Disturbed brush and broken branches along the route supported the theory that a large creature had been moving near her, if not following her. Enhancing the audio from the camera, experts noted a sequence of steps heavier than a human's, but lighter than a large bear, interspersed with the guttural noises. The sound suggested deliberate observation. The creature was close enough to leave detailed prints, but not immediately visible to her. Cecilia's whispers reveal her scientific instincts kicking in. She notes movement, branch position, and sound direction, documenting the phenomenon while experiencing primal fear. By 6:36 a.m., the situation escalated. Cecilia's satellite communicator attempted to send an SOS via her Garmin InReach Explorer. Only a fragmented message with GPS coordinates was transmitted before the device failed, likely due to damage or environmental interference. This last transmission, combined with the GPS, camera, and audio data, indicated that Cecilia encountered a massive, intelligent, and mobile presence in the forest, one she had been observing intentionally but could not fully escape or communicate about. The investigation into Cecilia Mangrove's disappearance suggests she may not have been entirely alone in the Whisper Creek area during her final expedition. Jake Morrison, A 34-year-old software developer from Tacoma had been camping about 2 miles north of Cecilia's location on the night of September 11–12, 2018. An experienced backpacker with over 15 years of wilderness experience, Morrison shared a troubling account that aligns loosely with the timeline from Cecilia's digital evidence, hinting that someone, or something, may have been in the area at the same time. Morrison told investigators he woke at 6:30 a.m. on September 12th to a chilling 10-second howl from Whisper Creek, unlike anything he'd heard in his years outdoors. When he returned from checking the area, his campsite was unnervingly tidy, yet altered. Water bottles neatly by the fire ring, boots moved and aligned. Nothing was stolen or damaged, leaving him convinced it was deliberate, too organized to be wildlife mischief. Park Ranger Elena Vasquez, who had worked in Olympic National Forest for 15 years, provided crucial context about the unusual evidence found at Cecilia's campsite. In her decade and a half of investigating wildlife encounters and missing person cases, she said the prints were unlike anything she had documented before. They were larger than bear tracks, wrong shape for humans, and the stride length was unusually long, suggesting something that walked upright. Vasquez's testimony revealed a pattern of unusual incidents in the Whisper Creek area that had been quietly logged but not widely publicized. Over the previous 5 years, 3 separate hikers had reported disturbing encounters in the same region where Cecilia disappeared. Park officials had categorized these as unexplained incidents, but chose not to release them broadly, concerned it might discourage visitors or fuel speculation about the forest. The first incident occurred in September 2014, when a married couple hiked a remote stretch of the Whisper Creek Trail and reported feeling as though they were being followed. For over 2 miles, they heard snapping branches and low, indistinct noises that seemed to come from all around. Shadows shifted at the edges of their vision, disappearing whenever they tried to focus directly on them. By the time they reached the trailhead, they were shaken, convinced that something unusually large had been moving through the forest near them. The second incident occurred in October 2016, when a solo hiker reported several blurry photographs showing a large, upright figure moving among the dense evergreens. The images were grainy, but the shape appeared unusually tall, with movements that seemed deliberate and disturbingly human-like. The hiker also recalled hearing heavy footfalls nearby and low, resonant sounds that seemed to come from different directions within the forest, though it was impossible to pinpoint their source. The third encounter occurred just 8 months before Cecilia's disappearance. A group of college students camping in the area awoke to find their site disturbed, in a way reminiscent of Jake Morrison's later report. Tents were partially torn, supplies had been moved, and unusually large footprints, estimated at around 6 feet in length, were pressed into the soft ground surrounding the camp. Initially, they assumed a bear had wandered through, but the size and spacing of the prints suggested deliberate movement. Some of the students reported catching brief glimpses of a dark, hulking figure at the edge of the tree line, disappearing whenever they looked directly. Perhaps the most significant testimony came from Thomas Clearwater, a 73-year-old Quinault elder, explained to investigators that his people had always considered the Whisper Creek area both sacred and dangerous. According to tribal stories, the forest doesn't take kindly to those who try to take more than they should. Tribal records passed down through generations documented 7 unexplained disappearances in that area over the past century, with most happening in early fall when the forest is said to be most protective. In the weeks following Cecilia Mangrove's disappearance, investigators developed 4 main theories to explain what happened during her final hours in the Olympic wilderness. Each theory was carefully examined against the available evidence, but none of the conventional explanations could adequately account for all the disturbing details recovered from the scene. Investigators looked at several possible explanations for what happened to Cecilia. At first, a wildlife attack seemed most likely. The Olympic Peninsula has black bears and mountain lions that can attack people. Claw marks on her tent and the disturbed campsite suggested a large predator had been there. But this idea fell apart when they looked closer. There was no blood at the scene, despite signs of violence. Even stranger, Cecilia's belongings were carefully arranged, her boots placed neatly together, her camera equipment secured in waterproof bags, and her phone positioned in the creek rather than scattered around. Large predators don't organize things this way. Some thought a human predator might have followed Cecilia's social media posts and tracked her down. This would explain why her belongings were deliberately arranged instead of randomly destroyed. But the massive 18-inch footprints around the campsite were way too big for any human. Audio specialists said the recorded sounds didn't match anything humans or known wildlife could make. Plus, the remote location and difficult terrain made it unlikely a stalker could reach the area without leaving their own evidence trail. Another possibility was that Cecilia had an accident. Maybe she fell into Whisper Creek, got hypothermia, or injured, and became confused before dying from exposure. Finding her phone in the water seemed to support this idea at first. But her photos and audio recordings clearly showed she was alert and actively documenting something extraordinary in her final moments. Her pictures were well composed and focused, not the confused work of someone suffering from injury or exposure. Despite searching over 50 square miles, no trace of her body was ever found, though investigators noted that dense terrain can hide remains for years. The most controversial explanation for Cecilia Mangrove's disappearance was a Bigfoot encounter. The evidence was striking. Massive footprints with unusual ridge-like textures, audio recordings of unidentified sounds, coarse hair samples that defied DNA analysis, and a historical pattern of similar sightings in the region. Cecilia's final photos and audio suggested she had come face to face with something that both terrified and fascinated her, something she deemed important enough to document despite the risk. Her behavior mirrored reports from other Pacific Northwest Bigfoot encounters, where witnesses often described simultaneous fear and scientific curiosity. The convergence of physical evidence, witness accounts, and regional precedent made the cryptid theory difficult to dismiss. Skeptics argued that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, but supporters pointed to Cecilia's meticulous documentation as exactly that proof that could have reshaped understanding of the phenomenon had she survived to share it. Analysis of Cecilia's phone, GPS, photos, and audio revealed a clear sequence of events. First, the massive footprint, then a distant silhouette in the tree line, followed by direct auditory interaction, and finally her frantic movements as captured by GPS. Each stage escalated both tension and danger for Cecilia and for investigators reconstructing the encounter. The combination of her careful scientific documentation and the terrifying reality of an unseen, massive presence makes this one of the most compelling modern Bigfoot cases on record. The Olympic Peninsula has long been a hotspot for cryptid activity, with more than 200 documented Bigfoot sightings since the 1950s. What made Cecilia's case particularly significant was how her findings fit into this larger pattern, adding weight to a decades-long series of mysterious encounters. Environmental factors further strengthened the plausibility of her observations. Whisper Creek Trail is remote, with dense undergrowth, fallen logs, and uneven terrain. Sounds carry differently in thick forests, and shadows can conceal movement. For a trained environmental scientist like Cecilia, the combination of unusual footprints, auditory anomalies, and visual evidence made the encounter strikingly credible. In the 2 years before Cecilia's disappearance, the Olympic National Forest received 12 reports of unusual encounters within a 20-mile radius of Whisper Creek. Witnesses described consistent signs, massive footprints, strange sounds, a feeling of being watched, and behavior suggesting intelligence beyond normal wildlife. Park officials largely kept these reports confidential to prevent panic and protect tourism. But Cecilia's case brought them into the public record. What investigators discovered about Cecilia's preparation for the trip added another layer to the mystery. Her browser history revealed extensive research into local cryptid reports in the weeks leading up to her expedition. As part of her work on old-growth forest recovery, Cecilia had been studying the effects of wildlife on forest ecosystems, and she noted that many cryptid reports mentioned undisturbed areas and unusual animal activity. She had visited forums dedicated to Bigfoot encounters, downloaded academic papers about primate behavior, and bookmarked articles specifically about the Olympic Peninsula's history of unexplained sightings. This wasn't casual curiosity. Cecilia appeared to be approaching the search methodically, using her ecological research as a framework for documenting and potentially verifying an extraordinary presence. Dr. Sarah Marvis, a primatologist at the University of Washington, provided crucial expert analysis of the audio evidence recovered from Cecilia's phone. After studying the 47-second recording, Dr. Marvis concluded that the sounds contained acoustic properties unlike any known North American wildlife. The sounds demonstrated a vocal range and resonance that exceeded human capabilities while showing structured patterns that suggested intelligence and intentional communication. The physical evidence was equally compelling. Plaster casts of the footprints around Cecilia's campsite showed detailed textures along the pads and toes, suggesting they were made by a living creature rather than a carved hoax. The stride length, over 6 feet, indicated bipedal movement by a creature significantly larger than any known primate species. Perhaps most intriguing was the behavioral evidence. The careful arrangement of Cecilia's belongings, the organized disturbance of Jake Morrison's campsite, and the historical pattern of similar encounters suggested intelligence and possibly even curiosity about human activities. This aligned with indigenous accounts of forest guardians who observed and interacted with humans in complex ways. The Olympic Peninsula's dense forests, abundant wildlife, and minimal human traffic provide ideal conditions for a large, elusive species to remain hidden. What set Cecilia's case apart was her meticulous documentation and scientific expertise. She captured fleeting evidence that had eluded countless others: subtle movements in the shadows, sounds with unusual patterns, and hints of an unseen observer. The tragedy was that her encounter ended with her disappearance, leaving these discoveries as clues without resolution. Even so, her findings remain controversial. In the scientific community and among the public, many dismiss the case as folklore or suggest Cecilia may have fabricated the clues. Bigfoot sightings in the Pacific Northwest have long been part of local legend, and skeptics argue that extraordinary claims require far more verifiable proof. Yet whispers persist. Hikers near Whisper Creek occasionally discover strange footprints, fresh disturbances, or fleeting glimpses of dark shapes at the edge of vision. Some report hearing low, resonant calls in the early morning mist, eerily similar to those captured on Cecilia's recordings. The forest seems to guard its secrets carefully, revealing just enough to intrigue the curious and unsettle the skeptical. Her disappearance remains one of the most puzzling unsolved cases in Pacific Northwest history. The official investigation, led by the Olympic National Forest Service and Washington State Police, covered over 50 square miles during an intensive 6-day search operation. Despite using helicopters, dog units, and dozens of experienced searchers, no trace of Cecilia's body was ever recovered. The case officially remains classified as a missing person investigation, though most investigators privately acknowledge that Cecilia is presumed dead. Her disappearance prompted significant changes in backcountry safety protocols, with park authorities now strongly recommending GPS tracking devices for solo hikers and requiring communication gear for researchers operating under official permits. Marcus has never stopped searching for his sister. He established a foundation dedicated to wilderness safety, which provides emergency communication equipment to researchers and maintains a database of unexplained wilderness encounters. Marcus continues to organize annual search expeditions, though he admits his focus has shifted from finding Cecilia to understanding what happened to her. 2 weeks after her disappearance, hiker David Chen discovered a cedar tree carving 3 miles deeper into the wilderness than any official search had reached. It showed the initials CM, followed by the words, "They're real," and tell the world, with an arrow pointing farther into the forest. Handwriting analysis strongly suggested Cecilia carved it, prompting an additional search in the surrounding area. No further evidence was ever recovered. This discovery raised more questions than it answered. Had Cecilia followed something into the forest? Was she trying to gather more evidence? Or had she been taken somewhere beyond the reach of conventional search efforts? The ultimate question remains. Did Cecilia Mangrove make the greatest scientific discovery of the 21st century, only to pay the ultimate price for her curiosity? Her case continues to inspire researchers, cryptozoologists, and adventurers who believe that somewhere in the vast Olympic wilderness, the truth about her final days is still waiting to be discovered. On February 1st, 2025, a 352-pound hiker entered the Ouachita Mountains alone. Her GoPro later revealed 4 minutes of horrifying footage, showing handprints too large to be human. 3 days later, her body was found downstream with injuries no one could explain. The evidence points to what locals have feared in these mountains for decades. Carla Maddox began her day at first light on February 1st, 2025, leaving the gravel lot at 9:22 a.m. The morning felt unusually soft for winter, air heavy with resin and leaf mold, mid-50s temperatures. Her early footage is methodical. She checks straps, adjusts her pack, jokes about being in Bigfoot country. But during her first camera check at 9:34 a.m., she pauses and turns toward the tree line. The lens captures what made her stop. Underbrush bent inward at chest height, branches snapped cleanly, forming a corridor deeper into the woods than any deer trail should. She doesn't mention it. By late morning, she is 2 miles in. The trail here is a patchwork of red clay and exposed roots that turns treacherous once wet. That clay holds impressions deeply and preserves the slight shuffles of balance, how a heavier hiker compensates for slick roots where a foot slips and digs in. What it recorded that day, though, would prove far more significant. Creek crossings are shallow but dissembling. Currents funnel beneath the surface and hide loose stones that can rotate underfoot. Carla records short progress notes, stops to adjust camera angle for an overhung bench, and catalogs an unusual tree formation. The GoPro lens fogs, clears, fogs again. At 11:17 a.m., during a lingering shot of a small clearing, there is a clean, hard snap from the tree line, like tension on a large, dead branch releasing. The camera wobbles as she turns. She breathes an extra half-beat, then dismisses it to herself with a soft, indistinct phrase. On the first watch, it looks like nothing. On analysis, Waveform Review finds a low-frequency component layered under that snap, a pressure transient later matched to other recordings taken at the final crossing. That match wouldn't be made for another 2 weeks. Local records fill in context. Wildlife officers had logged stray reports in the valley the previous autumn, hunters noting unfamiliar knocks and heavy dragging noises near creek beds, the kind of territorial behavior locals attribute to a wood ape, or locally called Bigfoot. The station considered them unremarkable at the time. The Ouachitas have a long human presence and the usual chorus of raccoon, deer, and transient boar. Those entries become relevant only because they match the pattern: intermittent, heavy impacts in the understory, and a tendency for disturbance to cluster near the same river bend where Carla would later vanish. The implications of that pattern would only surface after investigators compiled the full timeline. By mid-afternoon, the weather turns. Rain begins in earnest around 3:15 p.m., gusts flexing the pines, lowering visibility to under 100 feet. The camera shows water beating, then streaming in small rivulets down the lens before she repositions it. Her GPS track indicates a steady pace until 4:41 p.m., when she pauses at the river crossing for roughly 11 minutes. There is no corresponding video. Analysts hypothesize she powered the camera down to save battery in the storm. The site itself is one of the more unstable crossing points along the route, slope undercut by previous floods, roots exposed like the ribs of the bank. The 11-minute gap is where the forensic picture begins to deepen. Her movement pattern immediately before and after the pause shows micro-variations consistent with balance correction, short lateral steps, weight shifted back onto poles, a cadence that suggests the current required careful negotiation. Then a lateral deviation appears. Her path veers toward denser trees rather than following the river's contour. GPS jitter increases technically in that span, the signal showing rapid, small-scale course corrections, evidence either of repeated attempts to find secure footing or of someone moving back and forth in a confined area. What the data couldn't show, the physical evidence would. When search teams later retraced her steps, they documented boot prints that matched her size 10 tread, interspersed with a second set of impressions. Those secondary impressions were deeper and broader and tracked a slightly different vector, angled toward the tree line, not downstream. The distance between them approached 4 feet, suggestive of a longer stride. Under the clay, the compression depth measured nearly twice that of her prints. Investigators noted no claw marks, no defined toe separations, just pressed ovals flattening the wet soil, heelless impressions that sank nearly 2 inches deeper than hers despite drier soil, extending over 15 inches in length. The full significance of those measurements wouldn't become clear until the autopsy. Technical explanations were considered and dismissed in turn. A heavier human carrying a pack could create deep impressions, but no team member, testing with multiple loads, replicated that tread or the spacing. Flood action can drag and reorient prints, but the pattern here preserved directional integrity. It pointed deliberately toward higher ground. Combined with the audio anomalies found in multiple samples, the evidence coalesced into a specific but strange picture. Something large had been present, moving with deliberate motion at the same crossing. Something that had been reported in these mountains for decades. The GoPro would confirm what those prints suggested. Her phone transmitted its final ping at 4:52 p.m., about 300 yards from the creek bend where the GoPro was later found. Signal and movement after that are unknown. Whatever happened next, her camera was still recording. The corrupted GoPro card produced a single coherent clip, 4 minutes and 7 seconds long, followed by intermittent fragments. For clarity, investigators reconstructed the clip in a frame-by-frame timeline, restoring what the damaged codec allowed and mapping audio anomalies against visible motion. What they found would force them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the valley. 00 to 040. The initial frames show a shaky, downward-facing view of wet ground, brown water sliding across red clay. The microphone catches the rush of the creek, mixed with heavy breathing and the faint rattle of trekking poles tapping against rock. Visibility is poor, fog low, light fading. Water riffles across clay. Light is flat and gray. The breathing is measured, deliberate. A faint scraping sound, consistent with pole contact on stone, repeats every few seconds. 041 to 120. The camera tilts upward, lifting to show a wider field, the river cutting through a tight bank, saplings leaning over the current. A glimpse of the Ouachita tree line appears through rainfall, dense, unmoving, the color of moss and bark. The lens captures a vertical tear in the understory, an area where branches curl inward. Carla's voice is faint but clear, a single laugh, followed by a brief remark about losing daylight, then a practical note about footing. She sounds tired, but calm. No sense of urgency yet. At 048, a sudden snap cuts through the audio, sharp, close, like a thick branch breaking under weight. The waveform shows a short, high-amplitude spike. The camera jerks left, her breathing quickens. She shifts the camera in the direction of the sound and takes 2 steps forward. Nothing visible moves in frame, but the sound repeats. Once, twice, farther back. A faint metallic click follows, possibly her trekking pole locking. Later analysis would reveal this wasn't the first time that sound had been recorded in this exact location. 1:21 to 2:00. The image stabilizes. The creek dominates the foreground. Carla steps into view, jacket soaked, hair matted to her face, then looks over her shoulder toward the tree line. The camera captures a partial reflection on the water, a blurred vertical form at the edge of the frame. She doesn't notice it. At roughly 1:36, wind drowns out her voice, and the microphone picks up a low, rhythmic sound, 2 deep pulses separated by several seconds. The waveform later showed subaudible vibration recorded as mechanical distortion, low frequency pressure strong enough to cause amplitude clipping in the lower frequency band, centered at 22 Hz. Spectral review showed mechanical distortion concentrated in the lower band, an infrasound-like pressure effect rather than a pitched call, producing amplitude clipping and a subtle warble in the ambient noise. That frequency would become critical when cross-referenced with older evidence. 2:01 to 2:30. Carla pauses, whispering a phrase that analysts later transcribed as her thinking she'd seen movement. She pans the camera to the tree line. A partial vertical blur is recorded in the edge of frame, an elongated shadow that does not match the wind-driven movement of branches. The footage then shows her stepping nearer to the water line. Her posture tightens, hands grip poles more firmly. At one point, she leans close to the lens and in a clipped voice says she thinks there's someone standing in the trees. It's not an exclamation, more an observational comment to the camera. Immediately after, the microphone captures a secondary low vocalization, softer but continuous beneath the creek noise, a rumbling, low-frequency growl. On the waveform, the 2-note pulse and the growl overlap briefly, creating a complex interference pattern. What that pattern meant wouldn't be understood until weeks later. 2:31 to 3:10. The camera turns downstream, facing away from the tree line. Mud swirls in a ring near the bank, an area of disturbed current appearing off-frame. The pattern is consistent with a large object entering the shallow water just beyond view. The lens catches a smear of darker color moving parallel to the bank, too broad and too slow for a deer or boar. Carla breathes hard. Her muttering increases in pace. A sharp thud sounds in the audio, impact against water or a submerged object. Immediately afterward, the growl intensifies and a second distinct impact resonates. The two events are nearly synchronous with the change in the reflected light on the creek surface. The next 45 seconds would contain the most disturbing evidence yet recovered from the Ouachitas. 3:11 to 3:45. The frame tilts upward sharply, almost as if the camera is pulled by force. The image is unstable. Trees streak past in quick blurs, and for a moment, a tall, vertical silhouette crosses the right edge of the frame, its proportions long and upright. The silhouette does not resolve into a known animal profile. The recording captures a final, elongated exhalation, an audible breath that differs in timbre from Carla's, and then a visceral sound identified by investigators as a short, high-pitched human cry. It is layered unusually in the spectrum and, on forensic playback, does not match the timbre profile of her earlier voice samples. The reason for that mismatch would become apparent during the autopsy. 3:46 to 4:07. At 3:57, there's a muffled exclamation, unclear whether from fear or surprise, followed by a violent jolt that throws the camera forward and a sudden impact and splash. The camera tilts sharply, landing half submerged. Water splashes across the lens in violent sheets. For 3 seconds, the image is underwater, bubbles racing past the lens. After the camera re-emerges, 4 corrupted frames, each lasting only a fraction of a second, were later recovered and enhanced. They show a towering, dark shape leaning over the lens, a massive shadow with a broad shoulder line and a long limb obstructing the view. The frames are grainy and partially saturated by water, but when sequenced, they suggest an upright creature momentarily above the camera before the feed collapses into static. That wasn't the last piece of footage the card would yield. The audio ends on a low-frequency wash, and then silence. That clip was recovered from a GoPro found downstream of the Ouachita River Trail. Authorities later confirmed that the scream heard in the footage wasn't hers. Forensic audio technicians later ran the clip through multiple filters. The analysis emphasized a strong, low-frequency signature present as mechanical rumble and harmonic artifacts. Technicians described the effect as an infrasound-like pressure band layered beneath the recording rather than a distinct tonal call. It remained an acoustic profile unmatched by any documented Arkansas mammal. Wildlife acoustic experts consulted on the file reported that while large bears can produce powerful low-frequency noises, the pattern and sustain of this recorded sound, combined with the timing of impacts and the absence of claw or bite damage visible in the footage, did not align with known bear behavior. The biological samples recovered 3 days later would rule out bears entirely. That mismatch became a central puzzle. The footage placed something large and deliberate at the crossing, producing low-frequency vocalizations, moving with an upright posture, and interacting with the water in a way that left distinct hydrodynamic signatures. The final corrupted frames offered a visual hint, brief, distorted, of an upright mass above the camera. No known predator in Arkansas makes a call that low or that sustained. But the locals knew what to do. 3 days after that footage ended, a joint search and rescue unit located the body of 36-year-old Carla Maddox roughly 9/10 of a mile downstream from her last GPS ping, a distance consistent with the creek's elevated flow during peak runoff. Her remains were found lodged between 2 fallen trees, partially submerged, her hiking jacket visible through silted water. What they found on her body would change the investigation entirely. The official search began at sunrise on February 2, 2025. Crews from 3 neighboring counties joined the operation, fanning out in staggered lines along both sides of the river. The priority was locating the source of the last GPS signal and any trace of equipment that could indicate movement after transmission loss. By mid-morning, a thermal sweep registered a brief temperature differential along the west bank, likely ground or water temperature variance from disturbed soil or retained warmth. Then it faded on the next pass. It was logged as environmental interference until ground teams reached the same grid and discovered Carla's backpack caught against a root cluster. One shoulder strap was torn clean through, not frayed or cut. The pack's frame was bent inward, as if compressed by weight rather than impact. The scatter pattern of her gear would prove crucial to understanding what happened. Nearby, the ground showed parallel drag impressions leading toward the creek. Investigators initially assumed the marks were caused by flood debris until they followed the line farther. Both impressions ended abruptly at the bank, where the soil dipped sharply and the same broad, heelless prints appeared in pairs heading into the water. The tracks re-emerged on the opposite side before fading into dense growth. At 5:02 p.m., a ranger's dash cam positioned along the access road captured faint, distant screams. The timestamp matched her final GPS ping almost exactly. Wind distortion obscured most of the recording, but analysis later isolated a single human voice followed by a deep exhalation, longer and lower in tone than the scream itself. That audio would resurface weeks later with additional context that changed everything. Radio transmissions from that evening reflected growing unease among search units reporting movement near the West Ridge and intermittent audio returns without any visual confirmation. By sunset, field leads ordered a coordinated pullback due to failing light. More than one team member later admitted the same thing, the feeling of being watched the entire time, especially near the tree line where those massive prints disappeared. The discovery occurred on the morning of February 4, 2025, after crews used aerial mapping to trace debris caught along the flooded banks. Carla, who weighed 352 pounds, had been hiking alone despite a storm advisory issued that afternoon. Investigators confirmed her phone had transmitted its final location signal at 4:52 p.m. near a low-lying river crossing, a half-mile from where the GoPro was eventually found. Her gear was scattered in a pattern investigators struggled to explain. The trekking poles were discovered upstream, wedged between roots. The pack lay farther down, strap torn clean through. The right boot surfaced another 50 yards away. None of it suggested an ordinary fall or current drag. The autopsy would confirm those suspicions. Recovery required lifting the entangled branches piece by piece to avoid further damage. The initial scene report listed no external trauma consistent with collision or animal attack. However, responders noted deep discoloration beneath the jacket along both upper arms and ribs, a mirrored pattern of circular bruising that made even seasoned rescuers step back. The full extent of those injuries was still unknown. The body of Carla Maddox arrived at the county coroner's facility at 6:17 a.m. on February 6th, 4 days after her disappearance. The ambient temperature inside the intake bay was kept at 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Condensation trailed down the stainless steel doors. A constant tap from the prep sink echoed under the fluorescent lights. The official cause of death was still unlisted when examination began. Following preservation in cold storage, the external assessment documented residual swelling consistent with prior submersion in cold water. Her clothing was cut away, laid flat, and photographed for fiber transfer. Each layer was coated in silt. Fragments of river debris were embedded in the fabric folds. No tearing or bite perforations appeared on any layer. Along both upper arms, large symmetrical bruises stood out, deep purple ovals forming a mirrored pattern that extended into the soft tissue. When measured, the centers of each contusion were spaced roughly 3 inches apart, in parallel rows, curving around the limbs as though from immense pressure applied by digits. The marks looked like the outline of hands, far larger than any humans. What those measurements meant became clear only after additional evidence surfaced. Initial palpation suggested rib fractures, later confirmed by post-mortem radiograph as ribs 3 to 6 on the right side. The breaks angled inward. The impact vector suggested compressive force delivered laterally, not the crushing collapse of a fall. The coroner noted that such localized pressure would require strength beyond ordinary human capacity. On the skin just below the right scapula, a faint impression in drying lividity formed the outline of a single hand, approximately 13 inches in total length, measured from the heel of the palm to the tip of the middle finger along the natural curvature. The biological samples recovered next would provide the most definitive proof yet. During cranial and facial inspection, mud was discovered in the nasal passages and larynx, indicating that she was alive when submerged. Microscopic examination showed aspiration of fine sediment particles matching creek composition. No defensive lacerations were present on the hands or forearms, only linear abrasions along the outer wrists, consistent with being pulled through coarse material. Trace collection followed. Under the left thumbnail, a small quantity of fibrous matter was recovered, coarse brown strands measuring over 3 inches in length. Under magnification, the fibers exhibited a keratin sheath thicker than that of human or known animal samples. The cuticle pattern was irregular, overlapping in scales rather than the uniform rings seen in domestic mammals. Preliminary comparison against reference libraries returned no match. DNA sequencing would reveal why. Each sample was sealed and logged for DNA sequencing. The official entry noted the anomaly as organic filament, source undetermined. The coroner's dictation recorded the key injuries: compression fractures of ribs 3 to 6, bilateral upper arm contusions with 3-inch spacing, absence of tearing or bite marks, and pulmonary asphyxia secondary to drowning. The pathologist added a brief remark in the margin. Grip strength indicated by pattern exceeds known human range. Laboratory technicians processed fluids and tissue samples through standard panels. No intoxicants, sedatives, or animal toxins were detected. The overall trauma presented as concentrated external compression followed by drowning, not collision, not predation. Late that afternoon, while the coroner finalized documentation, an assistant reviewed the recovered GoPro card one last time under cleanroom conditions. The file structure showed a hidden fragment appended to the corrupted end of the clip, 2 additional seconds previously unreadable. Audio only, no visual data. When isolated, the segment revealed a deep inhalation close to the microphone, followed by a single footstep pressing into wet ground. The step produced a suction sound typical of heavy weight on saturated soil. The sequence ended there. The implications were immediate and unsettling. The technician logged the discovery and attached the clip to the evidence packet. Its timing placed it at least 4 seconds after the point where water engulfed the lens after Carla's final audible breath. The recording implied that the camera continued to operate briefly once removed from the water, handled by something else. No further contact was captured. By evening, the report remained open, pending DNA confirmation. The official line on the preliminary certificate read, "Cause of death, asphyxia by drowning, secondary to assault by unidentified external source." The coroner refrained from speculation beyond physical evidence. Yet the phrasing of the final note, compression consistent with bilateral grasp, quietly suggested the shape of the unseen mechanism. Down the hall in the evidence lab, the assistant replayed the recovered fragment again at half speed. The inhalation was unmistakably deep, diaphragm-driven, resonant enough to vibrate the low-frequency range of the speaker cones. Between that breath and the step, a faint harmonic pattern registered, a tremor too regular for background noise. If she was already underwater, who, or what, was holding the camera? 3 days after the autopsy, a multidisciplinary review convened at the state's Wildlife Forensics Division to consolidate the remaining evidence, audio, biological, and environmental, and determine whether any of it could be explained by known species interaction. The meeting drew unusual attention for a drowning case. The cross-references they were about to make would tie together years of unexplained incidents. The recovered GoPro footage played in short bursts over the conference speakers, its low-frequency pressure more felt than heard. Comparative analysis revealed something unprecedented. The pulse pattern recorded in Carla Maddox's footage, 2 deep surges separated by roughly 3 seconds, matched an archival anomaly from 2018 recorded during a missing persons search near the Kiamichi River, 60 miles southwest. Both contained identical subaudible signatures once dismissed as environmental vibration. That classification no longer fit. The biological evidence would confirm what the audio suggested. Biological review followed. The coarse brown strands recovered from beneath Carla's thumbnail were compared against an older entry, sample number A 17433, logged in 2018. Both displayed identical keratin thickness and irregular cuticle overlap. The earlier strand had come from bark near another unverified sighting. Degraded mitochondrial sequences showed partial primate markers. Cross-reference tests confirmed a 94% sequence similarity across amplified regions. Analysts estimated the probability of unrelated contamination producing identical anomalies as low based on regional sample comparisons. The thermal imaging recovered next would provide visual confirmation. A damaged motion-triggered wildlife camera recovered near the site added a third layer. Its final infrared frame, time-stamped at 4:53 p.m., 1 minute after Carla's last phone signal, captured a tall, upright heat mass moving mid-stride along the creek. The proportions suggested a figure over 7 feet tall with a bipedal gait. The thermal reading registered cooler than human but warmer than the environment, consistent with an insulated body mass. The following frame was corrupted beyond recovery. Internal correspondence showed disagreement between divisions. The wildlife branch classified the image as an anthropogenic misclassification, implying a distorted human presence. The forensic unit rejected that, noting the infrared temperature differential was incompatible with human physiology. Their joint statement was reduced to one phrase: source undetermined. The audio cross-correlation would settle the debate. Audio specialists later cross-correlated both the 2018 and 2025 clips. The results revealed identical harmonic distortion centered at 22 Hz. No known Arkansas mammal nor environmental condition produces rhythmic pulses of that frequency. When the waveform was amplified, a subtle modulation emerged, one that rose and fell like inhalation. One analyst noted it aligned perfectly with the deep inhalation recovered in the GoPro's final fragment. The implication: the same biological mechanism was active in both recordings, years apart, across nearly identical terrain. The review ended without consensus, but the compiled data, primate keratin, infrasound pulses, a bipedal heat signature, outlined something neither animal nor human. Whatever left its trace in that valley hadn't vanished. It had stayed close. And there was still one more piece of evidence waiting to be found. The official case summary was released on February 10, 2025. It described the incident as a hiking misadventure resulting in accidental drowning. The sheriff's statement emphasized weather conditions, unstable terrain, and limited daylight as contributing factors. No reference was made to the bruising pattern, the unknown fibers, or the recovered GoPro footage. The file was closed with no pending criminal investigation. The public version told only part of the story. Local reaction was immediate. Residents who lived along the lower Ouachita ridges questioned the official conclusion, citing years of unverified sightings and unexplained noises in that same stretch of forest. Within days, hunters operating along the western watershed uploaded footage showing large, barefoot impressions pressed into saturated clay, similar to those found near Carla's last known location. The video was dismissed publicly as inconclusive. Within 2 weeks, an expedited state laboratory analysis returned the DNA report. The analysis listed the organic fibers recovered from beneath Carla's thumbnail as containing unidentified primate DNA with partial human correspondence. The sequence was incomplete, degraded by water exposure, yet distinct enough to rule out contamination. The result could not be categorized under any known North American species. The file was forwarded to a private research consultant, where it remains archived under restricted classification. One final piece of audio remained undiscovered. The coroner updated the internal notes but did not amend the public record. The official narrative, accidental fall, fatal submersion, stood unchanged. Internally, though, several staff members acknowledged the evidence suggested direct physical contact. The handprint, the rib fractures, the grip bruising, each detail implied deliberate force. For the first time, physical evidence suggested a human-like primate was responsible, a creature long rumored in these woods: Bigfoot. Weeks later, one last piece of audio surfaced. A data technician revisiting archival files discovered the Ranger dashcam from February 1st still contained unreleased footage. The vehicle was stationary, parked along the access road 2 miles from the crossing. The clip begins with rainfall and static interference. 40 seconds in, a single, heavy exhale cuts through the noise. Slow, deliberate, drawn out until it fades into the rhythm of the storm. Then come 3 footsteps, each separated by long pauses, the last one fading until only rain remains. That audio was logged, time-stamped, and stored with the rest of the evidence. It was never publicly released. If it dragged her into the river that night, where did it go after?